Honored to be joined by ESPN.com, ACC writer extraordinaire, co-host, I guess, of Inside Access on the ACC network with our friend David Hale. Andrea Adelson has been on the show before. She's wonderful. Andrea, how are you?
No, I'm doing great. Thanks for the kind words. It's great to be back on with you.
Man, you're busy, man. I can't bother you as much as I would like. So, but I appreciate your time, and I want to get to the piece that you wrote about Carson Beck in a second. But right down the street here tomorrow at noon, we have two absolute legends. One in the pro game, one in the college game, coaching against each other for the first time. We've already had to sit down with Reese Davis. I guess it was during the ACC meetings when they had Belichick and Sweeney talking football. Boy, I've asked this question this way for a lot of people. Relative to expectations, who's been more disappointing? I know the answer is Clemson, but there's an element of this where you can talk about North Carolina too. Man, we didn't think that this game would be like, it wouldn't have the kind of meaning it does. That we didn't think that it would be this case during before the season started.
Yeah, the game's completely irrelevant, and so I hope folks enjoy a Ludacris concert at 9:45 in the morning.
9:45 for Ludacris,
right? That's what it's supposed to be, right?
It is ludicrous.
It is ludicrous in many ways. Yeah. But, look, I thought North Carolina would struggle, quite honestly. I did not think Clemson would struggle. And so the fact that we're here asking questions about what has gone wrong with both programs is certainly not something I had on my bingo card going into the season. I didn't feel super great about North Carolina's roster makeup, quite honestly, because they went so heavy into the portal in the spring, and it wasn't a great portal class to begin with. Right. And a lot of their best players from last year either are in the NFL or ended up going into the transfer portal, right? So you understood and realized, at least from our perspective, that there was going to be a step down in talent. At least that's the way that I viewed it. But I think I also felt like, well, you've got a coach who's won all these Super Bowls. Certainly they'll be well coached, and maybe that talent deficit will be made up for by the effort, the hard work, and the coaching. Well, I mean, none of that has played itself out for North Carolina. And then on the flip side of it, for Clemson, it's hard to believe that a team this talented has played as poorly as it has. But, we have an example last year of Florida State being super talented and playing down to their talent level and capability. So it's a fascinating dynamic. There's no question about that. But hey, I'm going to be tuned in at 12 o'clock. I know you will be too.
Absolutely. I mean, I think Clemson is almost trying to force, figuring this out. And I heard Roddy Jones yesterday, ESPN analyst. He's been on this show before as well. I heard him say that they look like they're pressing to him. And there's a lot of talented players. There's a lot of future NFL players, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I didn't think the offense would be great because I was never a Cade Klubnik guy. But I thought the defense would be, and the defense is anything but at this point. Syracuse they made them look bad early. Troy didn't, but it's Troy. But, man, the way Georgia Tech moved the ball on them when it mattered, to me, those were really the alarm bells.
Well, I'm glad you're talking about the defense because so much of the focus on the 1-3 start has been on Cade Klubnik and the offense. And nobody's really talked about how the defense is pretty much the same as last year. I mean, maybe they're better at going against the run, but not really in the grand scheme of things. And the biggest thing for me, when they brought in Tom Allen and you look at his resume and his reputation and what he did at Penn State and the structure of the Penn State defense, who they had on that defense last year, it felt like it was extremely transferable to Clemson. The strength up front, being able to sign Will Help from the transfer portal to help them rush the passer, right? The strength they had coming back in their secondary, which I thought Clemson had the strongest secondary coming back in the conference. Penn State had a lot of similarities in terms of the three levels of their defense and how they made things work en route to, college football playoff semifinal appearance. So I think it just shows you can't necessarily wave a magic wand and fix things because you brought in a new defensive coordinator. There were obviously clear issues with the personnel, and I feel like Peter Woods has underperformed to his potential. So has C.J. Parker. Will Helt's the only guy that I think has played up to a good standard, and he's new. So what does that tell you about the guys who are returning to this team? It just feels like this is a locker room that is disjointed, that's not together right now, and that the coaches haven't been able to get their potential out of them, and the defense is included in that. That was their biggest liability a year ago, and I felt like they had fixed it. But clearly they have not, and you pair that with an offense that has now taken a step back from where they were a year ago, and that equals a 1-3 start.
All right, I need a feel good. Andrea Adelson is here at A. Adelson ESPN on Twitter, and the feel good is it kind of you mentioned it with Clemson. Last year, defense was the problem. Last year, defense was the problem for Miami, but they had Cam Ward scored a ton of points. Looks like defense is not the problem for the Hurricanes now. And the offense, I know you wrote about Carson Beck, and I'm going to ask you about that specifically in a second. The offense was really good for about 2.5 quarters against Notre Dame, and it's kind of just been okay since. But, man, their defense is really good, and both lines of scrimmage are great. This is a throwback game. I grew up watching this game first Saturday in October every year. It was a classic. It's the first time in a while we've had a good one.
I can't wait because I do think these two teams are really evenly matched. And when you talk about a throwback, it's because both teams are so good on the line of scrimmage. And this is going to be a game where they are going to be absolutely going after each other on the offensive and defensive lines. And may the best man win their battle. Because even though Florida State lost last week, their offense was still able to run the ball. And that's what their bread and butter has been this season. That's what they wanted when they brought in Gus Malzahn. They're a better rushing team than Miami is. Miami, though, has the better offensive line when we're talking about the overall package with run game and pass protection. So that's a huge matchup to watch, especially since Florida State's defense last week did not look as good as it did in week 1 against Alabama. They didn't dictate terms. And so this is going to be a fascinating matchup in my view. Which team up front is going to dictate the terms in this game? We know Miami has done that. Florida State did that against Alabama and is capable of doing that once again, right? So this is going to be one of those knockdown, drag-out fights with just absolutely terrific line play, in my opinion, on both sides of the ball. So I know a lot of folks are super high on Miami, as they should be, but I don't think people should think last week for Florida State means they're going to be 3-9, right? Go back to what happened a year ago. I don't think so. Now, they still very well may lose the game, but I don't think this is a situation where Miami is 2 touchdowns better than them or 3 touchdowns better than them than they were a year ago. I think it's going to be a fabulous game, and I can't wait to be there and watch it in person.
Yeah, it's funny because I root for the ACC. I'm an ACC guy. I'm a grad of the University of Maryland, which I was told used to be in the Atlantic Coast Conference. I don't really recognize what's going on there now. But for me right now, I just assume that whatever is good for the league won't happen. So I mean, bless Virginia's heart. Virginia might be very good. They're certainly good on offense. But that result didn't bode well for the ACC. Would have been much better if Florida State and Miami, this would have been a top 10 matchup, not a top 20 matchup, because Florida State's now in the bottom of the top 20. And if both teams were undefeated, a loss would not have put anybody, essentially potentially by the side of the road. And if Florida State loses, it's going to be tough for them to come back from 2 conference losses. Might not be in the ACC championship game and difficult. The win over Alabama does help, but they'd have to win out for Florida State to be in the playoff. So I'm just assuming that Florida State will win the game because that probably won't be great for the ACC.
Yeah, spoken like someone who's been around the ACC as long as the two of us have.
Yeah.
Because I was literally saying the same thing earlier this week when I was trying to figure out who I was going to pick in this game. I'm like, I feel like on paper Miami's a better team, but Florida State's going to win because it's just an ACC, right? Hashtag go ACC thing that's going to happen. So I have thought and felt, which is why, honestly, I thought Virginia was going to win last week.
Yeah, exactly.
So I wasn't surprised by that outcome, but it'll be a great game. And I have to tell you, we had Mike Norvell on our show this week, and he was in a great mood, and I just liked the vibes that he had. So after that interview, I'm like, oh my gosh, Florida State really is probably going to win, huh? So yeah, I guess we'll see if it's a go ACC moment or if it's a positive go ACC moment, and that Miami can continue to kind of carry that undefeated flag for the conference.
And the truth is, if Miami were to win out, which they could, although their schedule, they really did get a difficult schedule from the league this year. If Miami were to win out and Florida State had just the one loss, maybe we'd see another game down the road in the ACC championship game. So maybe both of these teams, maybe it would be best for the ACC. Now I have talked myself into the other way. Yeah, exactly. Andrea Adelson is joining us here on the Adam Gold Show. All right, let me get to the Duke game at Cal. Oh, no, let me ask you real quick about, because we have two new quarterbacks, two transfer quarterbacks in. Tommy Castellanos came from Boston College, from within the league. He's had a wonderful year. Carson Beck really went through it, and he got hurt last year. How has he rebuilt? Because I know you wrote about it. How has he rebuilt himself, maybe his image, in a place like Miami?
Yeah, I mean, when he got to Miami, it was not great from an image perspective because he had been through it at Georgia, as you just mentioned. Then he's in the headlines because his fancy luxury cars get stolen from the home he's sharing with his girlfriend, who is an influencer and playing on the Miami basketball team, Hannah Cavender. Then she blasts him on social media as it relates to their breakup, right? So the first few months at Miami, you're like, oh, this guy came to Miami, and yeah, it's all Miami, right? But from that moment, I think he took a very introspective look at himself and was kind of like, what am I doing here, right? Like, I can't just keep having all of these negative headlines associated with my name. And a lot of it at Georgia was his play, but a lot of it was his body language, right, on the field. Like, people just pointing at every little thing he was doing and thinking it was related to the girlfriend or his social media presence. And so, he really changed in a lot of ways. And I wrote this in the story, he was broken in a lot of ways when he got to Miami because of all the criticism last year and the injury all piled up and rolled into one. He needed to figure out who he was outside of whatever persona people were assigning to him. And so I think his time needing the rehab at Miami helped him become a better teammate, a better leader, because now he's around his teammates all the time, right? All he has is football. All he has is his rehab. All he has is his goal to play again, which was in question when he got hurt, right? So he channeled everything into getting himself not only ready to play, but ready to be the type of teammate that everyone around him could rely on, and being unselfish about it, right? Like you mentioned, Miami's offense has looked a little bit not like last year. And a lot of that's by design because they don't need the razzle-dazzle of Cam Ward because the defense is so good and they can run the ball. But Carson's been very unselfish in terms of, well, if we're running the ball really well, we don't need to throw it 50 times a game. Let's just run the ball. And that's what they did against Florida at the end of the game. That's what they did against USF and against Notre Dame at the end of the game. So I think it's a much more mature Carson Beck and somebody who is ready to embrace everything that comes with being the team leader and the quarterback at Miami. Much lower profile now since the breakup. And I think that served him served him well also.
Yeah, well, I mean, he was high profile, and she is obviously high profile as well. So that was I don't know, like throwing a match to gasoline. Andrea Adelson is joining us here, and I don't mean that it was always going to be public and combustible. Duke is playing at Cal. I thought at the beginning of the season, people are sleeping on Duke. I think they're really good. I thought if they didn't completely melt down against Illinois, I thought the first half, I thought Duke was the better team, but for the mistakes, and I still think that it would have been different had they not put two guys wearing number 8 on the field during a punt return, because Illinois scored on the extended possession, and I think Duke was done at that point, and maybe they got beat twice by Illinois by the way they lost at Tulane. But I think Duke's got players. I think they got good offense. This is a fascinating game. Are you going to stay awake for all of it? 10:30 start Eastern time?
Well, of course I am, because the Miami-Florida State game is going to end around 11,
right,
which puts me in great shape to stay up to watch the Duke-Cal game till the bitter end. In fact, last year, quick side note, Clemson, Florida State was a night game, and it was the same time as Miami at Cal, probably around the same time of year. So I got back into my hotel room. I left the stadium. Miami's down, by 3 touchdowns or whatever. I get back to my room. Miami's making a comeback. Oh, yeah, it was fantastic watching the game to the bitter end. So that's what I'll be doing Saturday night. But, yeah, I mean, Duke, to me, is one of the more interesting programs in the conference, because I'm with you. Every time I went on a show in the preseason, I said Duke's a dark horse, right? Because I liked the roster makeup, and I liked what Manny did in year one. And in talking to the players at kickoff, especially on defense, they were very excited about, being able to take another step in this defense with Manny Diaz. And so I picked them to beat Illinois, and I picked them to beat Tulane because I felt like they were a good team. Well, now that I've gotten burned, I'm like, I'm not picking Duke anymore.
Stay away.
And then they won, of course, right? But to me, it's managing this late night start, right? It's managing the travel there. I know they had a practice on Wednesday night that they opened up for the students just so they could start getting acclimated to the time difference. Cal is a good team, and I know they got skunked by San Diego State, but they've got some moxie to them. They came back and beat BC last week. They've got one of the best corners, if not the best corner in the conference, and Zeke Massis, who's leading the way interceptions. I mean, Cal is very plug and play in terms of the elite corners that they have, and they've got another one, which I think is going to be a great matchup with Darian Mensah and some of those receivers. But the balance with which Duke is playing right now on offense, and now, the defense is starting to look more like a Manny Diaz defense. They're not making as many mistakes, tackling better, creating some turnovers, right? What they've done in the last 2 is what I expected Duke to be at the beginning of the season on defense. So I think it's a great matchup. And just to help Duke's luck out, I pick Cal. So that means they're going to win.
Perfect. But and I'm trying to think what would be better for the league. I can't figure it out. They're both undefeated in league play. Andrea Adelson, I appreciate your time. Enjoy what will be a very long college football Saturday, but I know you're up for it because you're a runner.
That's why we do it. We're up late and caffeinated and ready to go.
Thank you very much, Andrea. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks for having me again.
You got it.